what you turn on and off, whether you're home or not, and there's certain privacy and potential safety issues there. If people could know when you're home or not because of your power usage pattern, that might be something that criminals get a hold of, so you don't want to have that. And as you said, in other countries that have studied it longer, like in Russia, which has one of the longest studies of it, in the Cold War era and so on, they found that, microwaves have an adverse effect on our homeostasis or balance in our body. So they had exposure standards of 10 microwatts per square centimeter as opposed to, ours, which are, 1,000 microwatts, 100 times more. And, and now there's a body that regulates that. That's been arm twisting the Russians and the Chinese to get to the Western standards, that's the International Commission for Non-Ionization Radiation Protection. So that organization said, let's make this standard throughout the world so we can all, use our cell phones and other devices. And the Russians have been resisting that, but I think there's a lot of economic pressure to create a unified world standard. Unfortunately, I believe it's way too high, and it doesn't fit with the precautionary principle. For example, that might be in the neighborhood of 1 microwatt per square centimeter. That's 1,000 times lower, than depending on what standard people are promulgating. Certainly, you don't want to sleep in these high areas when we are vulnerable and repairing our body at night. And that's what I have a problem with when you're living in a bedroom next to the power bank, say, in an apartment building in California, where you really have to do measurements. And I'm starting to do these measurements now with spectrum analyzers and so on. So really give the data to the regulatory agencies and saying, these levels are getting close to what we consider to be a real danger. And I think at this point, this wasn't a good idea to roll out this technology.
What are you suggesting in the meantime for all of us for prevention? Let's go through several. One of them you've talked about, which is turn off your Wi-Fi systems at night when you're sleeping. What else?
Well, it all depends on how close you are to the radiating source. So if your bedroom is right next to where the power meter is, then you would want to consider sleeping as far away from that source or use another bedroom. That certainly, typically this radiation decreases by the square of the distance from the source. And so that would be good. Sleeping in wireless environments is not a good idea. Some people have their router or their wireless transmitter, near where they are. If you're working, say, on a workstation, try to put the transmitter further away from your body. Turn off the wireless when you don't need it. We're in an always-on society now, so we're always getting exposed to that. The other day, I flew in an aircraft where they now have wireless, like Delta has it, Southwest has it, and I've been measuring the levels inside the planes where everything bounces around, and you can see, they're much higher now than they used to be, about a factor, of 100. But then next to me sat a young lady with, one of those Samsung Galaxy iPad-like devices, the tablet PCs, and she was just watching a movie. That was fine, but then she turned on the wireless. I wanted her to turn it on to actually measure it, and from the background level, it went from about 1,000 in the plane, between 100 and 1,000 microwatts per square centimeter. It went up to 49,000 right next to the antenna, and that was on her lap. And I measured it there with a meter. So, having these tablet type of devices right next to where your reproductive organs are, like a girl's ovaries, a woman's ovaries, have a certain number of eggs. And we're starting to see now with this wireless type of transmission that sperm counts are being adversely affected in men and so on. So, natural selection is kind of taking its toll as we're doing this, and this is in the medical literature, and there's even the mechanisms described in the free radical formation, which is oxidative stress and so on. So, some people are definitely getting more exposed by having these tablet PCs wirelessly connected. body's tissues. So you might want to keep them somewhat away. Like the laptop computer wasn't really designed as a laptop, not to be put on your lap. It was a portable computer.
Right.
And, and so you want to keep the exposure down. That's always the number one. On a personal thing, there are certain type of devices people are experimenting with that they can put on their cell phones that make the coherent microwave radiation that comes off these phones, breaks them up a little bit so that the body may not be as impacted. It doesn't set off the adrenal alarm response as much, and perhaps not affect the immune system. But again, these need to be all studied. So there's a lot of those you can find information about on the web, but many of them don't have good studies. So I think I wish our government would do, or private nonprofits would do more studies in this regard. That's what our foundation is interested in, and looking under the microscope to see what happens with the blood is, and this affects the red blood cells. The red blood cells tend to clump together, something called rouleau formation, and then they're like stacks of coin, and then the blood doesn't go through the capillaries as well, the smallest vessels that are closest to the cells, and then they're kind of like a bunch of people trying to leave a room under duress. They all pile up in the door. So the red blood cells don't go bringing the oxygen to the tissues, and you probably find, and many people do when they work in front of computers and work with cell phones and all these things, after a while their muscles get tight. That's because lactic acid builds up just like a Charlie horse, and your muscles get tight. And going into the sunshine would help. Being exposed to sunlight, the full spectrum sunlight, would be very, very helpful. It breaks up some of this rouleau formation. So take breaks when you work with technology and get away from the Wi-Fi when you can. Taking breaks in the sun and so on would be helpful. Keeping good nutrition up. My experiences with people who are electrically hypersensitive that I've seen as clients, they tend to be also having issues about nourishment, mineral imbalances, not eating as well. They're also more hypersensitive. And when you look at the nutritional patterns of our kids, you're not surprised that with their heavy cell phone and wireless use, that they're having more and more issues. And we see this in schools now with attention deficit problems and so on. I think it's all connected with this ambient electrosmog that we're all exposed to. So, get good sleep, eat really a good nutritious diet with lots of antioxidant-rich foods, berries and fruits and vegetables that are rich in antioxidants. These all help, deal with the sort of weakening immune system that we see overall. Don't use your cell phone for a long period of time. At a time, keep the call short, remembering that the exposure standards were actually set for a 200-pound male using a cell phone for 6 minutes. That's kind of like, there are military-industrial standards that we've rolled out, and they were never really, at the time when they were rolled out, expecting to have cell phone towers all over the country and cell phone use by most of the people on the planet. And so you want to keep your exposure time there. Use a headphone, absolutely, so you don't have the antenna right next to your head. That would help a lot.
What do you mean a headphone? You mean a headset?
I mean like an earphone, like a little earplug thing that you don't talk with the cell phone next to your head, but have it a distance away from your head so that the radiation levels are lower.
Got it.
You can do that by plugging something and putting it in your ear. There's even ones called Blue Tube.
Yeah, by Mercola. What do you think of Blue Tube?
Well, the idea there was that the last part of the headset does not have the wire going right into the ear, because there might be some pattern coupling into the ear more. So they put a plastic tube there with a tiny little speaker at the end. So it's a little bit like the old communication on a ship between the bridge and the power generation system, where they talk down the tube. So that's what the idea of the Blue Tube is. Bluetooth